All right, guys, it's time for the Next Level Guy Show, a men's interview, interest, and improvement-focused podcast featuring interviews with the greats from all industries to help you better your life. Each week, a new episode features an interview with one of the greats, covering all aspects of their story, from life hacks to tips and protocols that have allowed them to live life on the next level. We then highlight concrete action steps that you can use to improve your life. And now, your host, Ian Dawson Mackay.
And today's guest is Dr. Teimojin Tan. Teimojin grew up in Montreal and had a very worldly upbringing. From taking his first steps on a plane as a child to solo travelling through developing countries in his youth, he was never one to feel stuck in one place. Through his travels, he developed a fascination and appreciation for indigenous cultures as he learned about plant-based medicines, survival, hunting tactics and local customs. He was also exposed to the health disparities and challenges facing the impoverished communities he worked in. Seeing people in need and feeling helpless to render aid inspired him to work for non-profit organisations in South America, Ghana and East Africa, and to pursue a higher education. By coming from a single-parent household, he wanted to be financially independent, so at the age of just 17, Teimojin joined the Canadian Army Reserve as an infantry soldier. He took a special interest in cold weather warfare and survival. He would spend weeks to months in the subarctic, learning how to make improvised defences, conduct patrols, assaults, search and rescue missions, and employ strategies to procure food and shelter that he learned from the native Cree Rangers. Eventually, Teimojin found his way to medical school at Michigan State University and became a doctor. Now he's a full-time ER doctor working in rural Maine and teaches survival medicine in his free time. These contrasting experiences in fighting and healing, with a healthy obsession with survival in the outdoors, led him to specialise in wilderness medicine. Teimojin's dream is to teach survival medicine internationally while working as a physician in underserved indigenous communities and being involved in community development projects. Teimojin started Survival Doctors to teach people how to prepare for medical emergencies in survival situations. He hopes to share his unique perspective on medicine so that others can venture out into the wild confidently and safely. Partnered with other medical professionals, military veterans, survival experts, and search and rescue specialists, Survival Doctors really does offer an educational experience like no other. And now, let's get to the interview. Thank you so much for coming on. It's an absolute honour to have a superstar like yourself who's saving lives, changing, educating the world on survival medicine. But how would you introduce yourself? Because you've got such a unique, amazing job.
I often undersell myself, so I'll give you my best. My name's Teimojin Tan. I'm a doctor, veteran, and I love everything survival and everything related to resilience and teaching your families how to be resilient and to love the outdoors.
I love how you can turn that into a soundbite. There's so much to pack in there. I mean, you've worked in the military, you've worked in medicine, you've been on the amazing TV show Alone. But what was your own personal journey you'd like towards medicine? I read somewhere that you spent a bit of time sort of touring when you were younger, seeing sort of developing countries and treating people, etc. How do you think that kind of shaped your viewpoint on medicine? Because we have a very arrogant viewpoint in the Western way of what medicine should be and how it's treated. How did, on the ground, treating people actually shape your understanding of medicine, how it should be run?
I think I was very fortunate to stumble into the field of medicine and I would even broaden it and say to the realm of healing and helping people. Because really, I did stumble into it. I wasn't the person with the best grades. I probably did have some ADHD as a kid. And the only reason why I started to do better in school was because my cousin went to an awesome college. And I thought he had a cool uniform. And I just decided to pick up my grades because of that. But I started going on adventures, solo adventurings internationally. And one of the, I think the best ways to do it as a young person is to not only do something out of your comfort zone, to explore, to go on adventures, but also to give back to communities while you're doing that. So I was very fortunate to get the bright idea of volunteering for micro infrastructure projects at a very young age. And I was doing that in East Africa. I was doing that in South America and multiple places around the world. And it was nice because your introduction to those countries wasn't like your tourist locations. You were literally put with a host family, worth like a dog for 12 to 16 hours a day to either build a school, dig a well, clean up areas of massive pollution. And you really got to know the people there. And I think the really profound changes that happened in my perspective was seeing not only the different living situations between different nations, but also the different perceptions of what happiness is, what family is, and what health is. Because I felt like there were very, very different in perceptions in those particular fields. And it was very cool to start doing work in places that have indigenous populations. So with the Warani in South America, with the Maasai in East Africa, I really kind of lended on to the fascination about traditional knowledge and how that shaped not only family dynamics, heritage, but also how people would define what it means to be well, what it means to be strong. And it was very, very cool to see how medicine in their own context was passed down from like maybe some written, most of the times verbal, and to kind of witness firsthand how it impacted people. So everything from like herbal medicines to like witch doctors to like bone setters. And it was only after I actually pursued a career in medicine that I understood what the bone setters were doing. So these are people in East Africa who, no matter what type of ethnic background you're coming from, what tribe you're from, you go to this particular ethnic group and they knew how to reset your bones. And they were basically doing primitive casting. And the way that they were doing it, the way that they were pulling on bones, not much different than our orthopedic surgeon, not much different than what I would do in the ER. And it was just fascinating to see that connect from those different origins of information. And it was through those type of interactions that made me want to learn more and to help. And that was the initial kind of desire. So again, it was finding that interesting thing, that passion, that dissonance between the people who didn't have a whole lot, who needed a whole lot, and wanting to do more. And that kind of set me on a path of my own education, my own training, and kind of the style of how I like treating and what I like preparing for.
You've got some backstory. Like we were saying as we started the call, there was about 9 podcasts I could think of just on you alone. And I think that's something that was really interesting, was how people use the earth, the environment, to treat them. And I think the pandemic really showed how literally prepared most people are. Like how if you take food away, you take comfort away from people, they go down very quickly. And I remember speaking to Samuel from Prep Medic, and he said, "Oh, you've got to speak to yourself." And 2 minutes into your show, I was like, "This guy gets it. I want to have him on," because it really makes you realize that in any survival situation, we're screwed. Do you think that's a problem with our understanding of medicine just now? Is we rely on somebody fixing us? We're not resilient enough, or not capable enough to fix ourselves, to get ourselves out of trouble?
I think innately, most humans have that resilience deeply seated in them. I think the difficulty is these days we don't give ourselves the opportunity to unleash that resilience. It takes something in our life, whether it's a tragedy, family passing, financial like disruption, or just a loss of resources, to really bring that out of you. Especially, I would say, especially if people are counting on you. That's where I think humans shine, is when you put someone through some kind of travesty, and then knowing that that person is responsible for a kid, their partner, and see how that person shines and how that
Yeah.
person evolves in a very short amount of time with little to no training. I think everyone has that resilience in them. And I think having an opportunity to unleash that, to cater to that innate capacity, is something that needs to be kind of fostered in our everyday community. Because what is our rite of passage in North America as an adult, as a man, as a woman? Like, is it getting your first car? Is it graduating high school? When you look at some of the people in East Africa, they're like literally hunting lions in groups of 6,
Yeah.
and they are circumcising themselves, so like when you kind of pair that type of adversity with what is the adversity that we are sending our kids to go through, and is it just like college, is it just like passing grades? I think there needs to be some kind of structured nurturing opportunity for resilience.
Because I've got people before on the show who have said about the use of psychedelics and mushrooms, and how, we don't have rituals from boyhood to manhood anymore, and how we've kind of lost our way. And you went on alone, and I think it kind of helped you find yourself. And I think that's why a lot of men are struggling today. I mean, a lot of people will know, like, understand, like an ER, they've probably been for a broken leg or something like that. So if we start there and kind of move into the more extreme stuff, how do
Mm-hmm.
you deal with, because you're an ER doctor at the moment, in a situation where we are treating somebody, how does an ER doctor get taught how to deal with the high pressure, the adrenaline spike, you've got 5 kids coming in an ambulance, 2 are unconscious, one's, hanging on. How do you deal with multiple incidents, dealing with that stress, to go into that zone to treat
For sure.
and not just lose it like a lot of people would in that similar situation?
I think it's very easy for anyone to get overwhelmed in that situation when you have multiple people coming in, there's mass casualty, your resources are low, you don't have enough personnel. And I think it's only human to kind of feel that stress. And I would say my training and just my personality kind of lends to that type of situation. Because number one, like with the military, you're always being trained to adapt and overcome, right? They specifically push you to a point of breaking and to a point of failure, and then seeing how you react afterwards. It's never about like, hey, this is our mission from point A to point B. It's like as soon as you step off, it's all going to shit. And what are you going to do as like a lowly private when your captain gets shot, when your sergeant gets shot, and when your corporal is kind of spazzing out, and you're literally the person last of the stack going into a close quarter combat situation? And how are you going to then lead like a small section of 8 to 12? Like the military does that really well, at least in the Canadian Army, where my training's from. And that's kind of like my context. They really train and force like people as low as a private to maintain and to step up to that leadership role if all else fails. And I think that training was very instrumental. And at the same time, like I said, I wasn't a smart person growing up. For the most part of my life, I was stumbling along the way. And what I admire now, going through all of it, was my kind of my willingness to fail, my willingness to kind of go head first into something, not knowing if I was doing it right, not knowing if that was the right direction for me, but just to do it and to figure it out along the way. Because when you give yourself that opportunity to fail fast and to learn fast, I think that really helps you when you get into situations like you're in the ER and you may not have all the options or answers right away, but you know that you can calm your mind down enough to think about what's exactly just a foot ahead of you, stabilize that situation, and then have the chaos settle just for a moment to have a little bit of a plan 2 steps down the line. And that ability to kind of step back, I think, is the most important in an ER leadership position. Because if you are just like focusing on one bleed, on one extremity, on one patient, and you have 5 people dying in your ER, like you just can't function. You just can't save those people. So your ability to kind of put out fires as they go and to almost do this rapid meditation is super, super important. One of my mentors taught me how to meditate in the ER of all places. And I think that has been something that I applied to multiple different aspects of my life as well.
Because that's something you notice. So, like, is if you're in a hospital and there's tons of people who have trained and all that, is fine. You see somebody fall and knock themselves unconscious in the street, or majority of people just stop and look. Even worse nowadays, people get their phones out and stuff. A lot of people are looking for someone else to take control. They're looking for a more adulty adult, as I said on The Simpsons one day. What has that taught you then about working your time in these sort of remote places, about using the resourcefulness, using your kind of falling back to your training, taking charge? Is that something you can teach somebody how to do that? Because some from Prep Medic, he was saying, to be fast but methodical. Do you utilize that kind of teaching while you're like treating, say, out in a trek or things like that? What's a way of thinking about treating while you're outside of an ER situation?
So no matter where you are, the way that one dies is very, very similar. Like the physiology doesn't change, the science doesn't change. I would say even more so, whether you're like a medical student, a nurse, or anyone in the medical field, versus someone who is, let's say, in a stack, whether you're in the military or if you are on an expedition with one medic with you. It is so important for that medic to pass on that knowledge as they're going, because if he gets injured or she gets injured, then that whole team is at risk. So I think to instill that leadership and to instill that confidence, and what Sam was talking about, that methodical way of evaluating and assessing what's going on and treating it, in emergency medicine, it's very algorithmic. So if you, let's say, for the tactical combat casualty care guidelines, it goes through like a March algorithm. So the things that can kill you very quickly, and you're basically remembering the words March, and it's associated with like massive hemorrhage, airway respirations, and circulations, and hypothermia, hypothermia. So if you're always going down those, all you're remembering is like 5 words or 5 letters, and you're just going down that thing, you're able to not only know what to look at for next, but also able to delegate as well, saying like, hey, I'm going to be taking this arm, this leg, looking for massive bleed. I want you to take the other side. You're doing your sole responsibility is to look around the head and face and make sure the airway is open, and then kind of moving down that algorithm. So I think it's very feasible for people to learn how to do that, and to run through enough scenarios where they are comfortable leading and delegating those tasks, because that's what I do, and that's what I teach for my in-person training for survival medicine. We learn the basics, we learn the proper sequence, and then we just run scenarios over and over again. And the cool mix is that, okay, yes, you save someone's life, you stabilize that injury, but rescue is not coming. We're on an expedition, we're deployed, rescue is not coming, or at least like days out. How do you manage your environment? How do you manage your team so that your scene is safe enough to continually monitor and continually care for your patient? So that's kind of like the step 2 of survival medicine. It's not only the medicine part, it's the survival part. And I think those 2 skills are required if you're thinking about kind of end of days or really, really bad situations where you lose access completely to healthcare.
Because I think a lot of people are watching like Fallout and these kind of shows just now, and they're assuming that, yeah, you put me out there, I would cope, no bother, I'd be doing this, I'd be doing that. And fine well that they'd be going out and get themselves electrocuted, they'd be eating contaminated foods, they'd be drinking, polluted water and stuff like that within 5 minutes. It's almost like the ego leads rather than common sense in these situations. Do you think it's that where you find a lot of the actions? People look at the sexy side, in air quotes, of saving and survival skills, but we don't actually look at, like, a lot of it's just created by stupid actions. By somebody wearing jeans and a t-shirt thinking the mountain temperature at the bottom is going to be the same at the top. Or these kind of things. Do you see a lot of silly errors that people make that create most of the problems you have to face?
I would say both on an acute and also on a chronic level as well. So in the ER doctor, we definitely get our young males who touch snakes, get bit, or go on a trail where they're not supposed to, fall in, break something, or even worse, fall into very cold water, get hypothermia, and drowned. So we've all seen that both in the context that I'm working in now and when I was working in Ontario on a peninsula. So we definitely see people putting themselves into danger with bad ideas and ill preparation and ill training. But at the same time, on the flip side, from a chronic standpoint, I would say the majority of people coming in with their heart attacks, with heart failure, with strokes, there has to be some responsibility, some onus that you put onto yourself, because a lot of these people, they're smokers, they have a poor diet, unwilling to change, unwilling even to take their medications, and they just come in every few weeks for the same thing and slowly getting worse and worse and worse. So I think it is kind of there is some responsibility to the person getting injured, but also in these situations, especially on the chronic side, there is a lack of resources and education in those communities as well. So that's almost like a systemic issue too.
Because one of the questions I had initially was going to be about, how you had that almost juxtaposition between being in the military, potentially taking life. Now you're kind of saving life in it. But I listened to an interview you had where you discussed about a triangle of skills. So it's like medical skills, taking, like the survival skills, but also the kind of killing skills, like kill food and etc. Do you think we need that combat skills, medical skills, and survival skills to kind of future proof ourselves for potential disasters, pandemics, and things like that? Is that something that you think all men should be kind of adopting now in a kind of rituals as they grow to be prepared for what could come?
I feel like it's something that I would want for my own family. It's something that I know that would be that would enable them to be incredibly well-rounded and useful, not only to our family, but to our community members, our neighbors. Because when you look at just very basically how to deal with stress, how to deal with raw emotions, our reactions to things, like fighting is a very good way to control that, because you are taking massive amount of aggression and force and controlling that. All the black belts you see out there, all these high level fighters, when you talk to them, they have to master a sense of inner peace that a lot of people who don't do that type of things, who don't have that type of discipline, are just incapable of doing without going through that training. So it's something that I definitely would hope my kids are interested in, something I definitely encourage. So yeah, I 100% agree that should be something you should be looking into, not just knowing the medicine, not just learning the survival, but knowing how to protect yourself, protect your family, and to feed your family too.
So in terms of like education, I mean, it's most people think I've got a first aid kit, that's enough. But like Sam was talking about, like using tourniquets, packing wounds, all this stuff that could potentially save your life. But you get the arrogance of men, like where we go, I could win the fight, I could get the girl, and I could save myself if you don't understand me. I see red and I explode, and you're like, yeah, 2 minutes in a jiu-jitsu class, they'd be crying by a 150-pound girl, I'm a blue belt, and even I think you only start realizing how little you know at blue belt before, and I think that's the problem, is that we don't educate ourselves after school a lot of cases. What are the kind of key things you'd be looking? Is it treating bleeds? Is it packing wounds? Is it using tourniquets? What are the key kind of skills that you'd want anybody listening to have a basic understanding of?
So I think the foundation of what you should know, at least like if you are in a place where you want to take care of yourself and other people, is knowing the 5 to 7 different things that could kill you within 3 hours. So massive bleed, definitely that's a no-brainer. Everyone should know how to stop a bleed. Everyone should know how to do CPR. Everyone should know how to optimize someone's airway. Everyone should know how to kind of evacuate someone from a dangerous situation. So some drag techniques, and in addition to that, when you're thinking about more of like the outdoor space, which is typical for what I teach, exposure is a huge thing. So do you know how to make yourself either warm or cool, depending on the climate? And are you confident enough to do that in every single climate, no matter what situation, with whatever tools that you may have, even if it may just be your hands? So those kind of contexts are things that are super, super important. And then, like, as I'm teaching my students, the things that are minor, like minor cuts or wounds and that type of thing, burns, blisters, those are things kind of taught along the way, kind of sprinkled in to the main things that I want them to learn, which is saving their own lives, saving the lives of their loved ones. And that course isn't super, super difficult to go through. Like we do it over a week, and we have longitudinal programs as well. So it's something that I think is available to every individual who wants to do it, especially if they want to do it as a family too, which I recommend.
Because that's what I love about your stuff. It's you cover such a wide range of topics. You go into great detail, but you don't like kind of overburden with acronyms and terminology. You kind of just explain it in a easy to understand but usable methods. And I always learn something from every one of your videos. It makes me realize how useless I'd be in a lot of situations and how much I need to prep, which I suppose is a better way of finding it now than when you need it. But when something bad does happen, how do you use science, clinical thinking, like situational awareness, these sorts of things, and not do the prehistoric, oh shit, I've now led us into a bear cave and now we're all going to die, or we've done something stupid. How do we not fall into the panic, but stay above it enough to deal with the situation?
Yeah, absolutely. If any of our military listeners are here, I think anyone at the beginning of their training or any kind of training of something difficult has gone into that funnel, into that black where everything else is just like hazed out, and all you see is that one stressor that you're terrified of. And I think very quickly you can do a number of things. And the two things that I specifically do for myself is focus in on my breathing. So that's number one. There's two techniques that I would recommend. Box breathing, a lot of military people are familiar with that, where you're breathing in a certain amount, holding it a certain amount, and exhaling a certain amount, and then holding again. What that is doing is, number one, you're focusing your attention away from that stressor and towards your kind of control. So that's number one, switching from that reptilian brain to that prefrontal cortex, that front of your brain. So you're using that part of your brain so that it's not overpowered by that reactionary emotional part of your brain. And number two, it activates the nerves in your chest wall. So the vagus nerve is your rest and digest nerve, and it goes from the base of your skull down both the sides of your neck, your carotid arteries. There's a point over there, and then it goes to both parts of your lungs. So what you're doing with that breathing technique is you're inflating that lung and using a physical force, your lung, to push against that nerve on your chest wall. And when it does it, stimulates that nerve to relax yourself. So your pulse is going to be decreased a little bit. That poundingness in your chest is going to be decreasing a little bit. And that's why a lot of military people use that technique before they shoot. So they do that, and they also bear down. So bearing down, again, the vagus nerve goes all over your body, including your gut. So as they're doing those breathing techniques and they're in the prone position trying to take that 200, 300 yard shot, they're doing that breathing technique and also bearing down like you're trying to poop. And what that does is it forces that pressure in your abdomen to press those nerves. And again, your heart rate goes down a little more, and then your shakiness of your hands goes down a little more. Now, this doesn't have to be a tremendously long process. Like if you go through 2 cycles, it's a few seconds. Another kind of thing that I do, and again, this kind of lends towards my mentor, who said, hey, this is how you meditate in the ER within like seconds, and it's such an amazing thing to do, because it is very scary when you see a kid a few months old kind of purple and gasping for air. And it doesn't matter how trained you are. That is a scary situation, because it is such a sad situation. That person's going to be passing at such a young age, and you are the only person to intervene at that point, Yeah. So one of the things that he did teach me was, again, Catching your breath. So that just reminds you to go through those breathing situations. And as you're going through that, you're just like, okay, that's my first thing to do, my breath. Getting your footing. So plant your feet nice and firmly, and maybe not lock out your knees so you get some good blood flow back. And that is just a reminder to almost touch into your sensation part of your five senses. So you're feeling what your toes feel in your shoes onto the ground. And the third one is touching in with your heart, just acknowledging how fast your heart's beating. Is it pounding between your neck, between your ears? And then very quickly realizing, or kind of putting into the forefront of your brain, of why you are there, what motivates you, why you are there to save lives. It might be, hey, I got to be this brave because my kid is that kid on the table, So just quickly getting into a reason. And as you go through all of those three steps, you are training your mind to attend to what you want it to attend to, instead of being reactionary to whatever that stressor is. And the more you do that over and over and over again, the more control you have over your own attention, the more control you have for your own emotions as well. And that's what every kind of person in a stressful job, and to be honest, anyone who has stress in their life, should be trying to do.
I love the way you look at it. It's so reassuring, and it's kind of, it's not just, you have to do this 30,000 times. There are ways to treat it. And I was doing that with like feeling my toes in my shoes and trying to like feel myself and like bear down and kind of really, just be in the moment. Because I think sometimes our minds are always wondering about the jobs, the work and situations, but a lot of times it's the misinformation we're taught. We're told we have to have 2,000 calories a day to survive. But there's people around the world on much less than that who thrive and succeed. Mm-hmm. But we're not used to being a wee bit, we're not used to not feeling hungry. We're not used to having regular drinks and ice and, what are really the baselines for problems? And what are signs of actual, where does it go from discomfort, from dehydration, from malnutrition to actual problems? For the lazy versions of the men who barely go outside, we get the food delivered to the door. How do we realize you're just hungry, to, okay, you need to stop, you need food, you need water, you need shelter, whatever it needs to be.
In regards to food, that's like way down the line. You can survive quite long. And if you've never seen the show Alone, just watch it and see how people survive months on like 200, 300 calories a day. You will not die from starvation in that short amount of time. So people go weeks with that low calorie state. So I would say important things to know are kind of like, again, moving back to the priorities of like what can kill you within 3 hours. And that's either issues with oxygenation. So whether the environment doesn't have enough oxygen, whether your organs aren't getting enough oxygen because you're having a heart attack or a stroke, or you're bleeding out, and regulating your temperature. So that's why temperature regulation is so important, because even if it's too hot or too cold, that can be a thing in and of itself that can kill you within 3 hours, or ballpark around 3 hours. So I would say the things to look out as telltale signs you're going towards that bad place is your heart rate may be fast. So we're talking about, if you're a regular male, kind of our age, is it going above 120 beats per minute and you're just not doing anything but sitting? That could be a problem. As it goes higher and higher and higher, that might signal that there may be stressors in your body. Homeostasis, the balance is off. So you might be severely dehydrated. You might have a very bad infection or fever. Another kind of good one to know is like lightheadedness. When you stand up, do you feel like you're going to go night night like immediately? That kind of tells me that there's not enough oxygen going to the brain. That tells me that your brain may not be functioning correctly. So just knowing those two kind of signs is very simple for a lot of different things. Like, it can be present in dehydration, it can be present in heart attacks, it can be present in heart failure. You can be getting dizzy and imbalanced because you're too cold or too hot. And that kind of differentiates between, hey, I'm chilly, versus, hey, I have severe hypothermia and my heart can go into a fatal arrhythmia and kill me in a few minutes. It's that imbalance, that change in your mental status that really distinguishes a very simple discomfort from a true medical emergency. Because a lot of people get that mixed up. You see, and I love Wim Hof. Like, I love Wim Hof technique. I support people who do cold plunges. But if you don't understand the physiology and that difference in the definition, very simply, the definition of severe versus mild/moderate hypothermia, and you're trying to Wim Hof your way out of a severe kind of submersion where you've been in the water for like half an hour and someone pulls you out and you're trying to Wim Hof and exercise, the chances of you going into a fatal arrhythmia is just so high that you might kill yourself voluntarily.
It's so difficult not to start going down rabbit holes. There's so many areas I want to jump into, because I'm trying to keep this. I'm trying to keep this one general in air quotes, because there's so much to cover. But I think this is the other thing, is like, people are listening going, yeah, but I'll be fine. I'll have my backpack. I'll have my £1,000 tent. I'll have my big 4x4, all these kind of things. But in alone, you were, I think, was it 10 items you were allowed to take?
Yep, 10 items, one set of clothes, or one spare set of clothes, and that's it. You have this very, very poorly constructed tarp that just comes to protect your camera gear. And if you use that improperly, it's not waterproof. So you see it on different seasons. People pitch up their tent and it's not tight, or it's in a weird type of configuration, and they're getting water inside their shelter because it's not taut. Because even if you have like new age tarps, it's not 100% waterproof if you don't configure it properly. It will seep through the membrane eventually.
So what did that teach you? Because they were saying to you basically, pick 10 things that are going to keep you alive. I know it's a show, but you're literally out there on your own. What did that teach you about the crap that we hoard and what's truly essential? Because a lot of people think, oh, I'm going to have £1,000, North Face jackets and other brands that are available, where I put that in. But, but there, you can't go wrong with a good knife, a good bit of rope, a good bit of a good torch, or whatever. What did that teach you about what is truly essential in life and survival?
So I think one of the main things that alone helps a lot of contestants realize is not only what's essential, but the pace of what survival is. If there's no kind of medical emergencies, I think the pace of what survival is something that is very important, because we see people building like log cabins out there. We see people doing extravagant things. And I promise you, for the most part, I would say the majority of people who take that strategies, they start gassing out at 30 days. You just burn so much calories. But for the essential things that you need, like Dave Canterbury is kind of a mentor of a lot of people in the survival and bushcraft world. And he advocates for kind of like 5 C's, or he even, I think he expands it to more than 5 C's, but definitely having like some way to cut, some item for combustion, a container, something for cover, cordage. These are kind of like your basic type of items. But when you break that down even further and you start building your skills, because a lot of the time you start with equipment, right? You start with things, you learn how to use it. And then I think the natural progression for a lot of people learning how to manage themselves outdoors is they move from bushcraft to primitive living skills. So how do you make your own cordage? How do you make your own blade? How do you make your own containers? How do you make your own shelter? And once you start getting comfortable with that, you soon realize how to be very effective using your hands. So the majority of the wood that I processed on Alone Season 9, I did with my hands. I did not use my axe because I knew how to break it with leverage without the same amount of calories. So if I was using my axe, I was doing like maybe 2 or 3 notches and then snapping it by hand using leverage. And the majority of my shelter, I didn't use like a saw or anything fancy. In fact, I didn't really use my axe at all to build my shelter. A lot of it was just rolled moss and almost making a quincy out of a moss. And my shelter was almost 2 to 3 feet thick, so it was a ton of insulation. And you start to kind of realize that it's not just the tools that you need, but the categories of things you need to master, so that if you don't have those tools, you know how to make it very quickly.
Because I think that's going to be a podcast on its own. We have to go into just about your time alone. But what did that experience teach you, about not just about yourself, but also what we truly need in terms of like, personal hygiene, sleep,
Mm.
exercise, company, connection to the world. Because there's the worldwide pandemic just now on loneliness. Majority of men say they don't have a close friend that they can talk to. There's spiraling rates of suicide in men. We don't feel like we have a purpose, etc. And yes, you can have a purpose when you're trying to save your friend, etc. But for those who are actually feeling alone in the kind of more the mentality section of it, what do we truly need, do you think, to survive, to flourish as men, and to survive the world? I know it's a grandeur question, but
Yeah, I think the one thing that really made an experience like Alone unique was seeing how your mental resilience, your spiritual resilience, could be fostered or broken in that type of situation. And I think the one thing that I would say I learned that was fairly new for me was knowing how to make those connections, those relationships without actual people there. And I think that was very challenging, because a lot of people leave there because they're lonely, they're missing their family, their wife, and so forth. But I think one of the things that I found really, really life changing for me out there was not only focusing on things that I was grateful for. I think gratitude is something that is so powerful and under practice in our day to day life, but having an effort to see where connections can be made. So to give you an example, it's not just like drawing a face on a volleyball and calling it Wilson and having that person be your best friend. But one of the things that I tried to connect with very deeply was we were on native lands. It was known to be native land. So, and I was seeing evidence that people were there in the past, just by the way just by the way the trees were bent. They were bent in a way that only humans would have bent it like that. And typically those were like cooking areas. So as I was seeing those places, I was kind of giving that time for myself to pay my respects to the people who were there previously, and to not only respect that, but to ask, not to kind of wallow in your own self-pity of like, hey, this isn't going well. I'm not getting food. I don't have my fire. My shelter looks like shit. But to ask, to be like, hey, this is like my situation, and to be open enough to believe that there might be someone that will answer. And what that does is, as you are focusing your attention into that one problem that you may be having and putting it out there, when you figure out a solution, or if the universe just presents a solution to you, that level of connection that you feel to something that is outside yourself is just like, I can't even describe it properly, because it almost feels like a spiritual experience. It feels like someone has your back. I think once you feel that connection, the situation that you're in just doesn't feel that bad at all. You don't feel lonely. So when I was out there, I was talking to the ancestors. I was talking to my grandparents who were passed. I was talking to friends who have passed at a very, very young age. And when I went to bed, I never felt lonely while I was out there. I felt incredibly supported. I felt surrounded, and I felt like tomorrow had opportunity, even though I didn't have a whole lot of calories in me, even if I don't have a whole lot of resources. So the combination of changing your mindset into the positive through gratitude and appreciation, and to finding those connections, whether it's with spirit of the woods or your ancestors or anything, verbalizing that and putting that out into the universe, I believe creates relationships where they may not be one, but it almost tricks your spirituality and your brain into feeling like you do. And I think that was the key for surviving long term.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And I mean, that's truly amazing, because there's a lot of people just now who feel disconnected because, they've broken up with a partner, social media, they don't really have true friendships and stuff like that. And I love how you found a when you diluted the noise, you actually found you could feel your senses heightened, and you felt a
Mhm.
connection to the world again. Do you think a lot of men should do that then, to go out? Because a lot of guys can't sit still with their thoughts. We have to have their phone to distract. We have to be doing something, going to the pub, drink, drugs, whatever it is, to hide the noise,
Mhm.
to hide that inner voice. Do you think we all should need a lone challenge where we go out and reconnect
Mhm.
ourselves to whatever spiritual, metaphysical connection it is to the world and the environment?
I definitely encourage people to do something like that. It doesn't have to be as extreme as putting yourself in the middle of nowhere with 10 items, but it can be as simple as putting yourself in an empty park. And one of the things that we can learn through meditation, there's two types of different meditation, broadly speaking. It's one, you focus on one thing. So that's the one we were talking about earlier today, focusing on your breath, focusing on your heartbeat, focusing on your feet. But the other version of meditation is just focusing on everything and letting everything kind of be in that space and being okay with it. Though the one thing that is very prominent in people who struggle with anxiety, mental health, depression, is they tend to ruminate and repeat things over and over and over again in their mind, especially before you go to bed. But one thing that can be helpful is to almost imagine that as a movie that you're watching, and you can't really press rewind, you can't press replay, and you're just letting it play into its natural progression and letting the next thing play. And when you're kind of doing it like that, especially in an environment that maybe nature, maybe not, but as you're absorbing all these little things, kind of train your attention to go out further and further. So it might be starting with a thought from a bad day, your boss yelling at you. You're just replaying that in your mind. And as you're replaying it, as it kind of naturally concludes, what is immediately in front of you? What are you seeing? What are you seeing beyond that? What are you hearing? What are you hearing beyond that? And as you go beyond and beyond and beyond, what you're doing is you're again training your attention in a different way. And as you are able to train your attention, that's where the majority of people who are incredibly resilient shine, because they can control their attention and their focus like masters.
It's time for a quick break. There are millions of potential products to buy, so how do you know which ones are worth your hard-earned money? Simple. You go to nextlevelguy.com/affiliates and explore those that will transform and improve your life. You'll find deals, listener exclusives, and special offers with some great companies. Recommendations are 100% honest and only on items Ian has tried or believes in. The companies showcased will make you a better man in all areas of your life. Simply go to nextlevelguy.com/affiliates and level up.
Because it's definitely, I was trying not to start taking notes there, because I struggle with like OCD, rumination, and I can relive a situation over and over again, and it's like you're carrying around your own mental prison. If you can't escape there, the prison between your eyes kind of situation. And I think that's something that you cover a lot on your videos. It's the survival psychology as much as the survival skills. You can teach somebody how to pack a wound, etc. and that. But if their head goes down the second they start sulking because they're hungry, etc., how do you build that growth mindset? Because I think you use a lot of positive affirmations. You've talked about I am. You've reconnected to the wilderness, etc. How do you connect a purpose to keep somebody going, to keep them positive? Is there a way to break this rumination, negative mindsets? Like, is
I
there
think
a
the one thing I think would be, not all kind of ruminations and kind of thoughts that may be invasive are solved by distraction. Sometimes you just got to go through it. And one of the things in that second meditation strategy is you're literally accepting, like, hey, this is the thing that is haunting me, and you're letting it play, and you're allowing that to play, and you're allowing yourself to feel whatever you feel for that. But the second step is to kind of allow that to pass as well. And sometimes it's hard to see what comes after it naturally passed. What that when that scene ends, do you just press the replay? And it's so hard not to press that replay, especially if something that is traumatic. And that's why it's so important to practice. And it doesn't have to work all the time, but to practice seeing and focusing on the thing that's right after that. So it might be another thought. It might be the sound that you hear in your bedroom, a buzzing, the Wi-Fi sounds, all these little things as you're training your focus. And I think the second thing that's super, super powerful, find a way to do the hard thing for someone else. Whatever hard thing in your life is, whether it's coming out of depression, quitting a habit, if you can relate that hard task to someone that you find more important than yourself. And for a lot of people who are challenged with mental health, they feel like they're the bottom of the totem pole, you know? They feel like they're the last thing. They don't even feel worthy of life, you know? Mm-hmm. If you can find that one person that you just want to give everything to have a better life, to have a better relationship with, to have a better outcome, and make all your efforts about that, that's how a lot of people, both in kind of our everyday living, but also in survival encounters, when we talk about these incredible feats of survival, like the plane crash in the Andes with the rugby team, once they made it about their teammates, once they made it about God, once they made it about something above themselves, they were able to find a source of power that they didn't even know existed. So finding those relationships, spending time to say, how can I do this for someone else? Instead of saying like, how can I stop thinking about this? How can I get over this? Like, how can I, like, who's that person who might be hurting from, let's say, an addiction, me being depressed all the time, me being anxious, me having OCD, like who would benefit the most from that change? And make it about them. Once you make it about someone else, you typically do see some headway.
That's a great insight, because we get so focused on our own shite, we forget about the people we're trying to help, or like to get help them out of the situation. Does that link in then to your philosophy about making failure as your favorite hobby? To go out and fail, to make it enjoyable, to fail as much as you can, and not look at it as a bad thing, but look at it as a learning experience to kind of, well, that's just another way I've figured out how it's not going to work. Does that kind of link into that kind of mindset, do you think?
I think the positivity and the I am statements, and for people who are listening to this episode or to me for the first time, the I am statements is basically everything that comes after I am, make it very, very like pertinent that it is positive. Because anything that follows I am follows you. And I think, I forget who said that, but that's something that stuck with me for a very long time. So if you're always down on yourself, that's where your focus is going to be. But if you give yourself that kindness, you start seeing the world in a different light. And that's super, super important to change your direction. Because knowing all your faults can be helpful in some contexts, but always saying that you're a piece of shit and things aren't going to go your way is not going to help you. And that's something that I could guarantee. Like, you've seen people who've done that and they never really get their break because their only focus is on ways things can go poorly. Once you switch your self-talk, once you switch your perspective, and once you focus on what's that one thing that I need to do to succeed, your only focus is on the next thing that might be your answer instead of all the things that can go wrong, because all the things that can go wrong isn't necessarily going to give you the right solution. It's not don't completely ignore it, but don't let that be the thing that controls your life.
Oh, there's so many things I want to just keep jumping in and going, what about this? What about this? But we got to do another couple of these. What do you think then that, because like a lot of people just now thinking, okay, I can get a first aid kit, I can learn how to pack a wound, etc. But a lot of us would not manage going up 5 or 6 flights of steps, but they would not manage to go a trek of 2-3 hours in a hot, conditions, etc. How do you build the performance chassis? How do you train so that you are fit and healthy, to walk, but you're not like super muscular and burning calories just by existing. But you're not completely useless if you had to lift a tree or whatever. How do you build the survival chassis to live so when you do need it, it's there?
So I think for this answer, I'll give you kind of like a two-step. The number one, like, it always comes back to your mental resilience, because your mind and heart is the thing that will force you to command you to take that first step forward. And it doesn't matter if you are jacked. You see these people drop out from the SEAL team all the time, these people coming in as high performing athletes, and they're washing up within the first week of training. So it's not necessarily the physicality of it. I would say someone that I would rather have on my team is someone who can get out of bed when they don't want to. And it can be as simple as that, as starting. If you are someone who doesn't work out, someone who doesn't go to the gym, someone who just watches TV on their couch every day, and that's completely fine if that's the type of life you want. But if you are on that path towards resilience, all you need to do is do whatever you find hard once, and do it again, and do it again, and do it again. And your definition of what is hard is going to change naturally. So like one of the things that inspired me on Alone to push further than I thought I was capable of was my mom. She is not in the best health right now, or she wasn't in the best health at the time of the show. And to kind of see her progress on what was hard for her, it may have been getting out of bed, when you're in that position in your mind when it's just like, I just can't even get out of bed. And just encouraging her to be like, if that's your one hard thing tomorrow, can you do that for me to just get out of bed? And the next day was like, can you get on a walk? Just like walk your dog. It doesn't matter if you feel sick. It doesn't matter if if the weather's bad, but no matter what happens, do you think you can commit to that one thing, walking just one lap around the block, no matter what? And we've come to a point where she's working out more than I am right now per week. So it does take that that step in your mind first to build all that muscles. And then when you're at that point of like, okay, what is useful? Just training your big muscle groups. So are you doing push-ups? Are you doing squats? Are you doing sit-ups? And then you can get to more granular with that. I believe you mentioned you do some jujitsu. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I used to do a lot of powerlifting, then go out of breath going upstairs, and then jiu-jitsu is just a whole world of difference. Like it's
yeah. So like in jiu-jitsu, like you come in and it doesn't matter if you were a power lifter or whatnot, like you get put on your back so quickly and you just have no idea what's going on. And I think still don't. I just started a few months ago, and it is something that, like, it is my hard thing. Like you go into a gym, you feel uncomfortable with the movements, and everyone's just pummeling you. Like everyone has over a year of experience on me, and it's just like hard because every single struggle, you maybe win one fight out of 20. So just having a hard thing and doing that, and then working towards just regular exercise, working on main muscle groups, can be as simple as doing push-ups, chin-ups, crunches, squats, and once you're there, like, find something like jiu-jitsu that kicks your butt and continue challenging yourself.
Because I always love that. They say, oh, you can run to be better at football. You can do, weights to be better at American football. To be better at jiu-jitsu, you have to do more jiu-jitsu. It's just a beast among itself. I mean, that kind of links into the next question. I mean, it's great to hear that your mom's doing a lot better, and you used her as your kind of motivational tool, and I love that. And I love how beautifully you've talked in other interviews about your mom, etc. But a lot of us think of survival as we're out there, plane crashes in the Andes, like you were talking about, that something bad happens. But we could have another pandemic where there's limited food. Mm-hmm. Would you want people just now to learn about growing vegetables? Like, even if it's just some cherry tomatoes and peppers, because I've got plants through there growing. I started doing jiu-jitsu because I realized that nobody's coming to save you sometimes if we're all trying to steal food from each other. Or, I've started going cycling because you realize you might have to go a long distance. what are these kind of, in the military, I think they talk about bang out bags. So it's like
Mm-hmm.
the kit you need for when you're going out. We used to have pandemic boxes during, the pandemic, obviously, where my parents had dry foods that they could rotate around and stuff like that. Would you build like a first aid one? Would you build food to prep for it now? Are preppers doing it the right way, or are they going a bit OTT in your opinion?
So I think the spectrum of what a prepper is kind of very, very vast,
Yeah.
and I think the heart of it, the sentiment of it is in my opinion something that I would want to replicate in my life, at least being prepared with food, with medication, with your training, and your resources and your security as well. I think all those, and communications is also a really important one, but having all these little facets and slowly adding into your family and your household is super important. You were mentioning about like bug out bags, and should people have bug out bags? Should people have like a food cache? And it is as simple as in Maine over here. We're in the US, we're in Maine, and the power's out for like 4 days. Like, do you have a way to heat yourself? Like I said, 3 hours without a normal body temperature can mess you up to a point where it can be fatal. So I think it's very prudent that people think about these things, not only from survival standpoints, but like just as a living and resilient standpoints. Do you have to rely on government aid and some kind of National Guard service if the power goes out? It can be as simple as that. And some people are in a point where they're struggling so much that they have to go to their neighbor's place, go to their parents' place, and so forth. So definitely think that people should have their own way to have water, own way to have food, own way to protect themselves, own way to communicate with the outside world, and to care for themselves, and to know all the technicalities that requires you to manage every little bit of that. And it does take a village to do all that oftentimes. And I think one of the things that I appreciate in the preparedness communities is that some of them, the ones that I really admire, are actual communities that are geographically close to each other, like whole kind of townships, and that's just like really cool, because it's not just like we're all in our own bunkers, like with a bunch of ammunition, which is fine, but it's cool to be in a community that has each other's backs, that knows like, hey, if this happens, they're willing to kind of share this resource, and I will share this resource with you. It's that is such a power. So I do think at the end of the day, it's not only being prepared in your own family unit, but also encouraging your community to be supportive of what you're trying to do as well. And I think my wife works in public health, so it's interesting to see that they are starting to focus on these like programs to help people be more prepared. And we're talking about like preparedness for like nuclear strikes and that type of stuff. So it's like very, very like, okay, if the government's thinking about that now, then we definitely should be thinking about how we could be more prepared.
Because that's, I think, a Fallout's kind of brought that home to a lot of people. That the new TV shows, people are kind of going, oh, right. I might need to actually start thinking about sharing, about resourcing, about prepping things and that. Mm-hmm. Do you find then that that's something that we should be introducing our kids to now? That, that they have a healthy respect for nature, for how food's grown, for how, how we kill animals to live off them, to butcher. Just to kind of give everybody that understanding that we hope it never happens, but we want them to be aware of it, have a healthy respect for the outdoors, but they can thrive in it if they need to.
Yeah, I think that's super important. And it's not only about a respect. I think it's the flip side of it is the gratitude for it, because a lot of kids growing up, they just don't really care what happens and how their food is made or brought to them. And I think that's very sad, because a lot of the times in this industrialized kind of world we live in, our needs are negatively affecting the rest of the world. And it might be local and it might be international as well. So I think having that healthy respect and gratitude for how food is made, how food is obtained, and how hard it is to grow something just for like a few calories. I think that's something that I wish on every family.
So, what would you say then to people who are listening who we hope it never happens, but how do you plan for trips? How do you plan for stock rotation? And, how do you build it into habit for checking these things, making sure the first aid box isn't contaminated, that the stuff's ready to use, stuff's in service, etc.? How do you make this part of your life so that if the worst does come to it, that if you're in the car and you go off the road and you have to walk 10 miles or whatever, how do you plan, like, for the weather, for the conditions, for sea stuff that might not, it might never happen, but how do you get as prepared as possible?
So I think wherever you are in your preparedness journey, if you do not know how to manage life-threatening things right now, it doesn't really, the other things kind of fall secondary. So I think everyone starting on this journey should start with that. What are your basic needs as a human being? And what are the things that can kill you? And can you intervene? And do you have the stuff to intervene for those things? And afterwards, you can start talking and kind of sprinkling in things like food security, and also like water purification is going to be a big one as well. Do you know how to purify your water, or are you relying on well water? What if that's contaminated? Like literally just down the street, the well system got contaminated a few years ago, and that cut off the water supply for like dozens of homes. So do you know how to purify your water? What's your secondary source? So I think starting should be the life-threatening things, and then slowly tagging on things that you may find an initial affinity for, whether that's gardening, whether that's hunting, whether that's communications, because that's something that I think is very, very underutilized and undertrained as well. Do you know how to work a ham radio? So all these things are super important, and there's so much out there that you can spend decades learning. But if you don't know how to save your life in the moment, I think none of the rest matter. If you can't save your own kid's life, if you can't save your own partner's life.
Because that's something I did notice is you've got this, you're disgustingly happy with your partner. I like you talk so beautifully and romantically about her on your Instagram, etc. But we can save ourselves a lot, a training up thing. How do we keep on top of the education, the learning, the teaching? But how do we encourage our partners to care? Or how do we plan in our preparedness for them if they're maybe not as interested in it? Do you find that kind of, but you make them, like you were saying earlier, having them as the person you want to help, that helps you?
So I think, so the question is like, how do you get someone who may not be as interested in preparedness as you are? So that might be your kid, your partner, your friends. And I think it does take some tact to this. And it's going to be different for every individual. For my wife, she's like a city person, and she has her specific needs. So like, are you able to make an experience kind of something that would be desirable by that person? So for me, we're going camping this weekend. We're going out to it's a rustic camping site. So we're kind of coming in like 2 or 3 miles hike, just carrying her own stuff. But her thing is like, okay, what do you want? What do you need to feel like this is going to be a positive experience? She needs to be warm. She needs to have coffee in the morning and wine and good food. So that means like, if your only barrier is to do those things, then do those things to the nth degree, and keep doing those things so that it's an ease in. And I think the number 2, especially when we start thinking about having kids, is what are the things that they value outside the actual activity? Because oftentimes, whether it's doing military stuff, tactical, whatever, what are the values that you want to instill into your kids, into other people? And can that experience kind of resonate with that end goal? So if you say like, hey, I want my daughter to be confident, I want her to be independent, I want her to be not scared of things that she might not be able to control. And I know that if we do this thing that's a little uncomfortable, that she would be able to develop those things. I think you would have your partner on board for that. And if you're trying to If it's just you and your partner, it's like, okay, what are the things that they wish they had in themselves? Sometimes your partner tells you like, oh, like I really admire this about you. And it may be the thing saying like, can I share that skill? Can I share that value? Can I share that resilience with you through this? And I'll make it awesome. But I think this is one way we can do it.
I love that. I love the way you look at it. But I mean, I love how in your social media you give a lot of thanks to your wife, and you talk about how she's completed you and she makes you feel happy, and she's your why almost. How for very single people like myself, how do we find like somebody like that? I mean, unless she's got a sister, I'm screwed. But how can we find our version of that so we're not alone? And yes, I hate myself for using it like that, but
yeah. So I would, number one, I would encourage everyone who's in that position, because I've definitely been in that position multiple different times in my life. And I think it was over time. Are you the person that you want would want? So be very, very honest with yourself. Are you that person? And if you're not, my first step to recommend to you is, what does that person look like? It might be a financial thing. It might be a physique thing. It might be a education thing, a training thing. If you are not that person, as a man, can you make yourself into that person? And I think 9 out of 10 times, if you don't have an incredible disability, and even if you do, are you that person? And are you willing to be that person for that like love of your life, So if you kind of do that, if you kind of image in your etch in your brain what that person looks like, what they are like, what their values are, how they make you feel, and say, am I willing to lose weight for that person? Am I willing to do this, that, and the other for that person? And if you are, you'll find it a lot easier to attract that type of people. And it can be as simple as going to a Facebook group and being like, Facebook group for camping or Facebook for preparedness, and saying like, hey, I'm practicing this thing this weekend. We're doing it as a group, and then just basing it off of interest. But I feel like a lot of people aren't necessarily honest with themselves in kind of realizing they might not be the person that your person is looking for yet. And I would say yet.
I think we all want what you guys have. You seem made for each other, and I think just that level of happiness is what we're all searching for, rather, and we all feel alone in that mental sense without somebody like that, because humans are like social animals. But you talked at the end of Alone how you spent ages in your kind of feed up stage at the end, writing out, because you had tons of thoughts and ideas and realizations about the world. What did that teach you then? And how did coming out of that now, how did that change you in your understanding of what we need to do to survive? Apart from hiring a great survival skills coach, funny enough, I know somebody that I'm going to highly recommend. What do you think it teaches us about being better men, about being better fathers, providers, but just interacting with the world in a better way? What kind of reflections did you take from the show?
The biggest reflections for me, number one would be having that opportunity to cut all the noise. Like sometimes it does take like a social media purge where you're just like deleting the app, and all you're focusing on is, hey, am I that guy yet? Or am I that person yet? And if you're not, okay, what's that one thing that I can focus on to be that person? And I feel like the one thing that Alone allowed you to be is it very, very to its rudimentary like foundation. It allowed you to single out one objective or like a handful of objectives each day and nothing else. So it might be like, I'm going fishing today, I'm going hunting today, I'm building a shelter today, and no other noise. It's not like, hey, I don't have a date this week, like I'm feeling lonely, I don't have like this in my life, I don't have a car, I don't have X, Y, and Z. It's not all about that. It's focusing on that one thing that you need to be where you want to be tomorrow. And if you're focusing on that one thing day after day, and then not only focusing on, but having gratitude for whatever happened in that day. Every day after that just feels different than how most people live their day to day right now. If you are reviewing, instead of like reviewing the thing that haunts you every night, you're going through the day and saying, what am I grateful for? What did I appreciate for the day? And as you are focusing on those things, you're focusing, okay, like that went well, that could have went better. What is the thing that I need to do to change? So looking at the things that went poorly in your day and looking at it as a stepping stone to change tomorrow. So like a lot of the things that I visualize that went poorly for me, like let's say I thought I would have built like a shelter in a day and it took a lot longer. What was I learning about that? How was I changing that to make it, okay, part of my warm up routine in the morning, where I was just doing something and slowly building a nest instead of freaking out that my shelter wasn't done yet. And I think when you're doing that and being kind to yourself, it just puts you in a very, very different mind space than if you are focusing on the negative.
I think I love the way you look at things. There's so much I want to unpack and go deeper, and I think we're just touching the surface. I'd love to have you back on. I know we're sort of tight for time today, but if somebody's listening, and I hope there's a lot of them, what would you want somebody coming to you in 6 months, 6 weeks, whatever it is, and they said, I listened to you on that podcast and I'm now doing XYZ, whatever it is, 3 to 5 things, whatever it was. Would you want them growing vegetables, doing jiu-jitsu, learning survival skills with you? What would you want to see if somebody, and how would they review their progression in that sense?
So what I would hope for everyone listening to this is the ability and the confidence to save your own life, to save someone else's life, and also the peace, whatever it may be. Find something that brings you peace and that you're excited about learning, and start there. It can be gardening, it can be livestock, it can be hunting, but we want to kind of gravitate towards those things and build those things off of the least amount of resistance, and having that bolster every foundation that we have in the preparedness kind of space. So if you come to me in 6 months and you want to learn more survival stuff, if you want to learn more medical stuff, amazing. But I want to check in on you. What is that one thing that you discovered over that time of training that gave you peace, that gave you ambition, that gave you curiosity? And let's talk about that, because that's something that I would love to hear, because I'm always looking for ideas to encourage and inspire my own future family, because everyone's going to be a little different. And with our advances in technology, like 20, 30 years from now, it's going to be a different world for sure.
Because I think this is why it's great that you've decided to create a course, that you're putting this kind of education out there, that this isn't something we're taught anymore by fathers about how to chop wood, how to shave. We're doing it through YouTube videos. We're doing it through like friends. We're learning about sex education sometimes by friends and stuff like that. We're no longer having that connection, the handed down rituals, etc. And you're giving out these amazing tidbits. You're doing courses, and I think you're a must follow for people to learn, not just how to survive themselves, but how to save others, how to help others, how to grow. So that if the worst does happen, you're there, but you can also look after yourself and connect better and become better men by doing it. You should be super proud of the work you're doing, but what would you want people to take from this? How would you want them? Before I get you come back on, we'll do one on alone, survival. Oh, there's so much I won't cover. You have no idea how excited you make, like just listening to you, it makes you. But what would you want people to take from this? Is a sort of general summary of connection, survival, however you want to sum up this conversation, because we bounced around a lot.
Yeah. I think the one thing that I want people to take from this is do the hard thing, do it once, and then do the other hard thing a second time, and just keep on doing it. And don't be scared of failing. Embrace it, anticipate it, and you'll find yourself in a much different place in a week from now, in a year from now, and you'll be so grateful that you just took that first step. So don't be afraid to fail and do the hard thing. once and again and again.
This would be a cracking point to sell. Like, have you got courses coming up that you think people should undertake? How can we kind of connect with you to start learning the skills? Will there be stuff on remote? Like what do you want the evolution of your brand to be, and how can we start interacting with you in that? Follow that journey, but also level up our survival skills.
Mm-hmm. So if you want to learn how to save a life, or if you want to learn how to survive beyond 2 weeks, I am producing courses online. So that's kind of your introduction, your first step into that journey of preparedness. You'll be getting live lessons from me at least once a week. And you'll also be getting access to our community and our recorded sessions as well. So right now we're going over the TCCC, the Tactical Combat Casualty Care. And even better is you can learn the majority of this for free as well. So every new member, I want to have zero barriers to people wanting to learn more about this stuff. So if you just want to dabble and step in and kind of see if you like it or not, you'll get 30 days for free. So 4 weeks of education, at least 4 live classes with me. And if you love it, stay on board. If you don't, go to something else that you're passionate about and go from there.
And I think you'd save so many lives just for the free classes, but your content is amazing. You give so much out for free that I can imagine the stuff you put in the course would be life-changing. I would highly recommend anybody listening to sign up. But how can we then follow you on social media? How can we find you on the World Wide Web? How can we connect with you? Until I can get you back on, because we've got to do another one. But how would you want people to connect with you in that first instance?
So if you want to see some of the stuff that I talk about, you can definitely look me up on social media at survival.doctors. That's plural. And if you want to step in and just drop into one of our live classes, you can find us at survivenow.online/lifeline. And you'll be getting that invitation for some free lessons.
And one thing I did want to know was you lost, was it 68 pounds while you were on a loan?
Yep, 60 something for sure.
What was the guilty pleasure you had after? What was the thing? Was there something that you craved that you like, sweets, ice cream? We all think we'd have certain things, but we all have this unique taste that we go for. What was it for you that you just couldn't wait to get to?
So there's one sub that I used to eat every single week for 6 years. That was at this little Greek place at the corner of Rachel and Esplanade in Montreal. And it was the first thing that I ate when I came back to Montreal. I literally had my sister drive in the opposite direction of home to go to the sub place. And I looked like a homeless, disheveled person. And the owner actually gave me $30 worth of food for free because he thought I was homeless. And it was the best experience I had in a long time. I went back when I was in full weight, and I gave him a poster because he didn't believe that I was on a TV show.
Well, that's it for another week, and thank you for listening. It's now time to take what you've learned and use it to develop and enhance your life with the key points mentioned. Listen, try it, embrace it, use it, and crush it. Now's your time to hit that next level in your life. If you liked this episode, then please leave a comment on the show notes or a review of the show on your podcast platform. Everything helps evolve the show. Until next week, keep seeking the next level in your life.